The birth of Italy, from ancient tribes to the rise of Rome, 1000 BC, 500 BC. Long before the shining cities of Rome and Florence, before the marble temples and mighty armies, the land we now call Italy was wild and untamed. Mountains carved the horizon, volcanoes smoked in the distance, and small tribes lived scattered across the valleys and coasts. This was not yet a country, only a land of farmers, warriors, and dreamers. The Etruscans ruled the north, a mysterious people who built great cities and crafted art from bronze and gold. They were skilled builders, traders, and sailors, connecting Italy with Greece and the wider Mediterranean world. In the south, Greek settlers founded colonies, places like Naples and Syracuse, bringing with them ideas of philosophy, democracy, and beauty. And in the central plains along the Tiber River, small Latin villages began to appear. Among them was a simple settlement of shepherds and farmers that would one day become the greatest city in history, Rome. Legend says that Rome was founded in 753 BC by Romulus and Remus, twin brothers raised by a she-wolf. It's a story of power, betrayal, and destiny. One brother kills the other and names the new city after himself. Whether true or not, the tale became the symbol of Roman strength, born from struggle, destined to rule. In those early centuries, Rome was just one small kingdom among many. It was ruled by kings, some Etruscan, some Latin, who built temples, drained marshes, and expanded the settlement. But the Romans were never meant to be ruled forever. They believed in something greater, the right of the people to choose their leaders. And so, around 509 BC, the Romans overthrew their last king, Tarquinius Superbus, and declared a new system, a republic. This was a revolution unlike anything the world had seen. Instead of a king, Rome would be governed by elected officials, the Senate, and consuls who shared power. Citizens had a voice, and the idea of liberty, libertas, became sacred. From that moment on, Rome was not just a city, it was an idea that people could rule themselves. Over the next few centuries, that idea turned into action. Rome began to expand, first conquering nearby tribes, then the entire Italian peninsula. The Roman legions, disciplined and fearless, moved like iron waves across the land. They built roads, aqueducts, and walls. They brought law, order, and culture. And everywhere they went, they spread the name of Rome. Italy was no longer a collection of tribes. It was becoming something greater, a heart beating at the center of a rising empire. Farmers became soldiers, villages became cities, and one people began to unite under the banner of Rome. By 300 BC, Rome was already the most powerful force in Italy. It had defeated the Etruscans, driven out the Greek colonies, and absorbed the Sabines, Samnites, and countless others. For the first time in history, the Italian peninsula stood united, not under fear, but under a shared destiny, and that destiny would soon stretch far beyond the mountains and seas. Rome would go on to conquer Europe, Africa, and Asia. But here, in the hills and valleys of Italy, its story had only just begun. The Roman Empire, glory, power, and decline, 500 BC, 476 AD. When the Roman Republic was born, few could imagine what it would become. From a small city on the banks of the Tiber, Rome began to rise, strong, disciplined, and unstoppable. The early republic faced enemies on every side. Powerful neighbors like the Etruscans, Samnites, and Greek colonies tried to crush it. But the Romans had something that others did not, a belief that service to the state was the highest honor. Every citizen, from farmer to senator, believed that Rome was eternal. Their soldiers, the Roman legions, became the most feared force in the ancient world. Organized, loyal, and deadly, they fought not just for conquest, but for pride. By 264 BC, Rome controlled all of Italy. But ambition did not stop at the mountains. Across the sea lay Carthage, a great empire in North Africa. and the two powers were destined to clash. The Punic Wars changed everything. Rome fought for over 100 years against Carthage, led by the brilliant general Hannibal, who crossed the Alps with elephants to invade Italy. Though he won battles, Rome never surrendered. Eventually, Roman armies destroyed Carthage completely, turning its cities to dust. The Mediterranean became Mare Nostrum, our sea. Now Rome was no longer a republic of farmers. It was an empire of millions, ruling lands from Spain to Greece, from Egypt to Britain. Its legions built roads that stretched for thousands of miles. Its engineers raised aqueducts and amphitheaters that still stand today. Roman law, architecture, and language spread across continents. But with great power came great corruption. Wealth poured into Rome, and so did greed. Politicians began to fight for themselves, not for the republic. Senators bought votes, generals raised private armies, and from this chaos rose men whose names would echo for centuries. One of them was Julius Caesar. A brilliant general, Caesar conquered Gaul, modern-day France, and became a hero of the people. But the Senate feared him. When he crossed the Rubicon River with his army in 49 BC, he defied the Republic itself. Civil war followed, and when Caesar emerged victorious, he took power for himself. He was not yet called emperor, but everyone knew the Republic was dying. In 44 BC, senators assassinated Caesar, hoping to save their old system. But instead, his death brought more chaos. After years of war, Caesar's adopted son Octavian, known later as Augustus, took control. And with him, the Roman Empire was born. Under Augustus, Rome entered its golden age, the Pax Romana, or Roman peace. For 200 years, there was order, prosperity, and culture. The Colosseum rose in the heart of Rome. The roads carried merchants, soldiers, and ideas to every corner of the empire. Rome had become the center of the world, but nothing lasts forever. Slowly, cracks began to form. Corruption grew again. Wars at the borders drained the treasury. Emperors came and went, some wise, many cruel. The empire split into East and West to survive. And while the Eastern Empire, ruled from Constantinople, remained strong, the western half began to crumble. Barbarian tribes, Goths, Vandals, and others, invaded from the north. In 410 AD, the unimaginable happened. Rome was sacked for the first time in nearly 800 years. The city that had once ruled the world now lay in ruins. By 476 AD, the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, was overthrown. The Roman Empire had fallen, but its spirit would never die. Roman law, language, and architecture would shape Europe for the next 2,000 years. Even as the world entered the Dark Ages, the memory of Rome still burned, a reminder of human greatness and human pride. And in Italy, among its ruins and silent roads, the seeds of rebirth were already waiting to grow again. The Middle Ages, kingdoms, city-states, and the dawn of the Renaissance, 476 AD, 1300 AD. When the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, the world changed forever. The mighty roads grew silent. The marble temples and forums that once echoed with senators and poets were now home to weeds and crows. The eternal city, Rome, was broken, and the dream of the empire was gone. But Italy did not die. It transformed. Across the peninsula, new rulers arrived. From the north came the Ostrogoths, fierce warriors who built their own short-lived kingdom. Then came the Byzantines, from the Eastern Roman Empire, trying to restore order. And later, the Lombards, a Germanic people, took control of much of northern Italy. The land was divided, torn by wars and shifting loyalties. Yet through it all, the Italian people endured. In the chaos, a new kind of power began to rise, not from kings or emperors, but from faith. The Catholic Church, centered in Rome, became the most powerful institution in Europe. The Pope, seen as God's representative on earth, ruled not with armies, but with words and belief. The city of Rome may have fallen politically, but spiritually, it became the beating heart of medieval Europe. Pilgrims from across the continent traveled to Rome to pray, to seek forgiveness, or to touch the sacred relics of saints. The church grew richer, its cathedrals more magnificent, and its reach stretched far beyond Italy's borders. But outside the holy walls, Italy was anything but united. The peninsula had splintered into dozens of kingdoms, duchies, and city-states, each fighting for power and survival. In the north, cities like Milan, Verona, and Venice began to grow strong through trade. In the center, Florence, Pisa, and Siena built vast wealth from banking and commerce. And in the south, the Kingdom of Naples and Sicily prospered under Norman and later Spanish influence. Each city had its own soldiers, its own flag, and its own dreams. Italy had become a patchwork of brilliance and rivalry, divided politically, but alive with energy. The Crusades in the 11th and 12th centuries also changed Italy. While knights from across Europe marched east to reclaim the Holy Land, Italian merchants saw opportunity. Cities like Venice and Genoa became centers of trade between Europe and the East. They built vast fleets of ships, carrying spices, silk, and gold from Asia to Europe. With every voyage, their coffers grew, and so did their influence. And from this wealth, from this mixture of war, faith, and trade, something new began to rise, something that would change the world forever. In the streets of Florence and Venice, artists and thinkers began to look back to the lost glory of Rome and Greece. They studied the old ruins, copied ancient manuscripts, and began to dream of a new age, an age of rebirth. This was the Renaissance, and though it had not yet fully begun, its first sparks were already glowing in the hearts of Italians. Even amid wars and plagues, beauty returned to the land. Churches filled with art, towns built towering cathedrals, and scholars whispered of knowledge that could light the world again. By the late 1200s, Italy stood at the edge of transformation. It was no longer the Rome of emperors, but the Italy of merchants, painters, and poets. The world had changed, and the Italian spirit, creative, bold, and restless, was about to awaken once more. The Dark Ages were ending, and soon the light of the Renaissance would shine from Italy to the entire world. The Italian Renaissance, art, genius, and the age of discovery, 1300, 1600. The year is 1300, and a new light is rising over Italy. After centuries of war and division, the land begins to breathe again. Cities that once fought for power now compete in a different way, through art, architecture, and ideas. This is the beginning of the Renaissance, a word that means rebirth, and nowhere in the world burns brighter than Italy. In Florence, merchants and bankers grow rich from trade. Among them, one family will shape history, the Medici. With their gold and vision, they will fund painters, sculptors, and architects who will change the way humanity sees itself. It begins with Giotto, who paints faces that look alive, eyes filled with emotion. Then comes Brunelleschi, who looks up at the ruins of Rome and dares to dream of building the impossible, a dome so vast it will crown Florence's skyline forever. He succeeds. The Duomo of Florence, with its red tiles and perfect symmetry, becomes the symbol of a new world, one where man, not just God, can shape greatness. Soon, art and science walk hand in hand. Leonardo da Vinci sketches machines that could fly. He studies the stars, the body, and the movement of water. His notebooks hold 1,000 secrets, ideas far ahead of his time. And when he paints, he captures the soul itself. His Mona Lisa, with her mysterious smile, becomes eternal. In Rome, the popes turn the city into a treasure of the world. They call upon Michelangelo to carve marble into life itself. His David stands tall, proud, human, perfect. And then, inside the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo paints the story of creation, stretching across the ceiling in a vision of divine beauty. Every inch of color, every brushstroke, tells of human ambition and God's inspiration. But the Renaissance is not only about art, it's about the rebirth of knowledge. Scholars rediscover the writings of Plato and Aristotle. Universities rise in Bologna, Padua, and Pisa. Men like Galileo Galilei begin to challenge the heavens themselves. They say the earth moves around the sun, a dangerous idea that shakes the power of the church. And while artists paint and scientists explore, explorers sail. From Genoa, a man named Christopher Columbus dreams of reaching Asia by crossing the ocean. In 1492, his ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, set sail. He does not find Asia, but a new world, America. Though his name would bring both fame and controversy, his journey marks the start of a global age, with Italy's spirit of discovery at its heart. Back home, Italy glows. Venice becomes the jewel of the seas, its canals shimmering with wealth and culture. Music fills its halls, art fills its churches. Florence, Rome, and Venice, three shining cities, each different, yet united in brilliance. But not all is peace. Power brings envy. Rivalries between city-states grow fierce again. Foreign empires, France, Spain, and later Austria, begin to invade and rule parts of Italy. The dream of unity slips further away. Yet, even in times of conflict, the Italian soul continues to create. Poets like Dante, Petrarch, and Boccaccio give voice to love, faith, and the human heart. Painters like Raphael and Titian fill the world with color. Every brushstroke, every line of poetry becomes a step toward the modern age. By the year 1600, Italy has given the world more than any other land: art, science, faith, and imagination. Its people have rediscovered what it means to be human, to think, to dream, to create. The Renaissance ends, but its light never fades. It spreads to France, to England, to all of Europe, and eventually to every corner of the earth. And at its center, always, is Italy, the land where humanity learned once more how to see beauty, truth, and itself. The fall and foreign rule, from glory to struggle, 1600–1800. By the start of the 1600s, Italy was no longer one united flame of glory. The light of the Renaissance still shone, but it flickered, dimmed by war, greed, and the ambitions of empires. The same land that had once given birth to genius was now divided, not just by borders, but by rulers who came from far beyond its shores. The Italian peninsula had become a prize, a treasure chest for Europe's great powers. Spain ruled much of the south, Naples, Sicily, Sardinia, and Milan, controlling them through viceroys and governors. In the north, Austria would later take over those same lands, its emperors deciding Italy's fate from Vienna. And to the west, France, under its great kings and generals, from Louis XIV to Napoleon Bonaparte, would strike again and again at Italy's heart. The dream of independence, the pride of the Renaissance, was fading into memory. Italy, once a teacher of the world, was now a classroom for conquerors. But even in defeat, the Italian spirit refused to die. In the grand palaces of Rome and Florence, artists and thinkers still worked. Baroque art, born in Italy, turned faith and power into breathtaking beauty. The Church of St. Peter's in Rome became a vision of gold and marble, its ceilings soaring toward heaven. Artists like Caravaggio painted with light and shadow, filling their canvases with raw human emotion, the pain, faith, and struggle of ordinary people. Music, too, found new glory. From Venice, a composer named Antonio Vivaldi wrote The Four Seasons, bringing the sounds of nature to life through the violin. Though the world changed, Italy's creativity never stopped breathing. Still, beneath the beauty, the people suffered. Taxes were heavy, farms were poor, and the pride of the old city-states, Florence, Venice, Genoa, began to fade. Trade routes shifted to the Atlantic Ocean after Columbus's voyage, leaving the Mediterranean quieter and poorer. The Age of Discovery had made Italy's old roots less important. By the 1700s, Italy was no longer leading the world. Its cities, once shining like jewels, were now shadows of their former selves. But the past could not be forgotten. The ruins of Rome, the art of Florence, the music of Venice, they reminded Italians of who they truly were, and that memory became a quiet fire. In universities and salons, young thinkers began to whisper ideas of freedom and unity. They looked at France, where revolution was rising, and dreamed of a day when Italy could be whole again. The people of Milan, Naples, and Turin began to imagine something daring. Not a dozen little states ruled by foreigners, but one Italy, strong and independent. In the late 18th century, a storm arrived that would change everything: Napoleon Bonaparte. With his army, he crossed the Alps in 1796, bringing both destruction and inspiration. His cannons shattered old powers, but his words about liberty, equality, and nationhood lit a spark across the peninsula. For the first time in centuries, Italians began to fight not for kings, but for Italy. Napoleon's rule would not last, but his invasion changed minds forever. When he left behind more than broken thrones. He left the idea that Italy could one day be one nation again. By 1800, Italy was still divided, still ruled by others, but a silent revolution had begun, not on battlefields, but in hearts and minds. The centuries of foreign rule had brought suffering and loss, but beneath it all, the Italian identity, proud, creative, and unbreakable, endured. The light that once illuminated the world during the Renaissance was not gone. It waited, quiet but alive, ready to rise again. And soon, in the 19th century, that light would blaze once more. A new chapter was coming: the fight for Italian unification, the birth of a modern nation, and the rebirth of a dream that had been sleeping for 1,000 years. The Risorgimento, the rebirth of a nation, 1800–1871. In the early 1800s, Italy was a land divided, a beautiful but broken puzzle. Different rulers, foreign armies, and old kings controlled its many pieces. But beneath the silence, something powerful began to grow: a dream, a whisper that spread from village to city, from hearts to history. Italy must be one. The centuries of foreign rule had left deep scars. Austrian soldiers still marched through Lombardy and Venice. The Pope ruled his own lands from Rome. Small kings held sway over Naples, Sicily, and Piedmont. Italy was not one country. It was many small states with no shared strength. But across Europe, change was in the air. The Napoleonic Wars had shaken old empires, and new ideas of freedom and nationhood had spread. Napoleon's fall in 1815 returned Italy to its divided state, but his legacy, the idea of unity, had already taken root. People began to believe that Italy was not just a place, it was a people. In 1831, a young nobleman from Genoa named Giuseppe Mazzini founded a movement called Young Italy. It was not an army or a political party. It was a dream for all Italians. Mazzini believed that Italy should rise as a single, free, and independent nation. He wrote letters, gave speeches, and inspired the youth to believe in one Italy, one flag, and one destiny. His words spread like fire: God and the people, for Italy, for freedom. Though Mazzini's early revolts failed, his ideas could not be killed. They lived on in the hearts of others, men of courage and action. One of them was Giuseppe Garibaldi, a sailor, soldier, and hero whose life seemed made for legend. Garibaldi had fought for freedom in South America before returning to his homeland to fight for Italy. He wore a red shirt, simple, bright, and symbolic, and it became the mark of his followers, the red shirts. Wherever Garibaldi went, people followed, believing he could make Italy free. He fought in Sicily, Naples, and the southern lands, driving out old rulers and bringing hope to the poor. The people cheered his name, Garibaldi, Garibaldi. But Italy needed more than bravery. It needed clever leadership. That leader came from the north, Count Camillo di Cavour, the prime minister of the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia. Cavour was not a soldier. He was a statesman, a master of diplomacy and strategy. He knew that Italy could not defeat powerful Austria alone. So he made alliances with France, with Britain, using politics as his weapon. Together, Cavour's diplomacy and Garibaldi's courage moved mountains. Step by step, Italy began to rise. In 1859, after a war between Piedmont and Austria, Lombardy was freed. In 1860, Garibaldi's red shirts swept through Sicily and Naples, bringing them under Italian control. It was no longer just an idea. It was happening. But now came the hardest decision of all. Garibaldi, the people's hero, could have taken power for himself. Instead, he chose unity over glory. He met King Victor Emmanuel II, the ruler of Piedmont, and placed all his conquests in the king's hands. With tears in his eyes, Garibaldi said, "I salute the first king of a united Italy." The dream of generations was finally becoming real. On March 17, 1861, the Kingdom of Italy was officially proclaimed. From Turin to Naples, from the Alps to Sicily, Italians were now one people under one flag. But even then, the work was not complete. Venice was still under Austrian rule. Rome was still held by the Pope, protected by French troops. The heart of Italy was missing. That would change in the years ahead. In 1866, during a war with Austria, Italy finally reclaimed Venice. And in 1870, when France withdrew its troops to fight in another war, Italian forces entered Rome. At last, after centuries of division, Rome became the capital of a united Italy. The bells of every church rang in celebration. The streets were filled with people waving flags and singing songs. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the Italian peninsula stood together. The dream of Mazzini, the courage of Garibaldi, the strategy of Cavour, and the leadership of King Victor Emmanuel II had achieved what once seemed impossible. Italy had risen, not as an empire of conquerors, but as a nation of people. A land reborn through passion, sacrifice, and unity. And as the sun set over Rome in 1871, the words that once echoed in secret rooms now rang openly in the air. Viva l'Italia! Long live Italy! Modern Italy, from world wars to republic, 1871-1945. In 1871, the bells of Rome rang for unity. But the story of Italy was far from over. The nation was finally whole, yet it was still fragile. The dreamers who built it had won a country. Now they had to build a future. For centuries, Italy had been the cradle of art and culture, but now it faced the challenge of becoming a modern state. The new kingdom had one flag, one king, and one capital, but it was divided in every other way. The north was growing fast with industry, railways, and trade. The south remained poor, rural, and forgotten. The government in Rome struggled to hold the nation together. Still, Italians were proud. They were finally free to write their own destiny. The dream of Mazzini and Garibaldi had become reality, but reality was hard. Poverty, illiteracy, and corruption haunted the land. And as Europe rushed into the modern age, Italy was desperate to prove itself. By the 1880s, Italy began to look outward. It wanted colonies like Britain and France. The government dreamed of an Italian empire, a return to Roman glory. Troops were sent to Africa, to Eritrea and Somalia. But the ambition met disaster in 1896, when Italian forces were crushed by Ethiopian warriors at the Battle of Adwa. It was a humiliating defeat, a reminder that Italy's reach was still greater than its power. At home, life was difficult. Millions of Italians, facing hunger and unemployment, left for new lives in America, Argentina, and Australia. Entire villages emptied as families crossed the ocean in search of hope. Italy was a young nation, but it was losing its people. Then came World War I. In 1915, Italy joined the war on the side of Britain and France, hoping to gain land from Austria-Hungary. The fighting was brutal, high in the cold Alps, where men fought and froze among the mountains. Hundreds of thousands of Italians died for a promise of territory. And when the war ended in 1918, victory felt hollow. Italy had won, but gained little. The soldiers returned home to poverty, chaos, and anger. That anger would soon have a name: Benito Mussolini. A former journalist and soldier, Mussolini founded the Fascist Party in 1919. He promised to restore order, pride, and power. He said Italy would rise again, as an empire, as Rome reborn. Many Italians, tired of instability and unemployment, believed him. In 1922, his followers, the Blackshirts, marched on Rome. The king, fearing civil war, invited Mussolini to form a government. And so began a dark new chapter. Under Mussolini, Italy became a dictatorship. He banned opposition parties, silenced the press, and filled prisons with those who disagreed. He built roads, trains, and factories, but also filled schools with propaganda. Children saluted him as Il Duce, the leader. Statues and slogans covered every city. He spoke of reviving the Roman Empire, of making Italy strong again. At first, many cheered, but Mussolini's ambitions led Italy into more wars. In 1935, he invaded Ethiopia again, this time winning, and declared the birth of a new Italian empire. But the world condemned his cruelty. Thousands of Ethiopians died, and Italy was punished with sanctions. Then, in 1939, Mussolini joined hands with Adolf Hitler. Together, they promised to remake Europe. And in 1940, Italy entered World War II on Germany's side. What followed was disaster. Italian soldiers fought bravely, but the campaigns in Greece, North Africa, and Russia ended in tragedy. Cities were bombed, food was scarce, and hope began to fade. By 1943, the war was lost. Mussolini was overthrown, and Italy signed an armistice with the Allies. But Hitler would not let go. German troops occupied the north, and Italy became a battlefield between fascists and partisans, occupiers and liberators. In the mountains and cities, brave Italians fought back, teachers, farmers, workers, forming the resistance. They fought not for kings or dictators, but for freedom itself. In April 1945, as the Allies advanced, Mussolini was captured and executed by Italian partisans. His death marked the end of fascism and the beginning of a new dawn. 2 years later, in 1946, Italians voted in a national referendum. They abolished the monarchy and declared a republic. King Victor Emmanuel's descendants left forever. For the first time, the people, not kings, not generals, would rule Italy. The dream of unity had finally found its true meaning, not in empire or conquest, but in democracy, peace, and hope. Italy had been reborn again, this time not through war, but through the will of its people. Rebuilding and Renaissance, the rise of modern Italy, 1945 to 2025. In 1945, the war had ended, but Italy was in ruins. Cities lay in rubble, roads were destroyed, and families were broken. The dream of empire was gone, replaced by hunger, fear, and loss. Yet even in the darkest moment, the Italian spirit refused to die. The same land that once gave the world Rome and the Renaissance was about to rise again, not through conquest, but through courage. In 1946, the people voted for change. The monarchy was gone, and the Italian Republic was born. For the first time in its long history, Italy would belong to its people. A new constitution, written in 1948, promised democracy, freedom, and equality. The wounds of war were deep, but the nation began to heal. In the 1950s, the streets of Milan, Turin, and Genoa buzzed with energy. Factories reopened, trains rumbled again across the countryside. Italians worked day and night to rebuild their homes and their hope. This period would later be called the Italian economic miracle. With the help of the Marshall Plan from the United States, Italy rebuilt its industries. Steel, cars, and fashion became its new empires. Companies like Fiat, Olivetti, and Pirelli became symbols of progress. In the fields of design and art, Italy rediscovered its ancient gift for beauty. Italian cars weren't just machines, they were works of art. Italian fashion wasn't just clothing, it was elegance reborn. By the 1960s, the world looked at Italy with wonder again. Rome became the heart of cinema, with Cinecittà Studios earning the nickname Hollywood on the Tiber. Actors like Sophia Loren, Marcello Mastroianni, and Gina Lollobrigida became global icons. Italian films won Oscars, Italian fashion ruled Paris, and Italian music filled the airwaves. It was a new kind of empire, built not on power, but on culture. But not all was perfect. The 1970s brought economic troubles, political scandals, and terrorism. The years of lead, as they were called, saw violence between extremist groups on the left and right. Bombings, kidnappings, and assassinations shook the young republic. The dream seemed uncertain once more. Yet again, Italians endured. Through faith, art, and sheer resilience, they found their balance. In the 1980s, Italy entered the global stage as a major economy, a founder of the European Union, and a bridge between North and South Europe. Italian brands, Ferrari, Gucci, Prada, Versace, became symbols of style and success worldwide. Italians had turned creativity into power. In the 1990s, political corruption led to a storm of investigations known as Mani Pulite, the clean hands operation. Many old political parties collapsed and new leaders rose. Among them was Silvio Berlusconi, a media tycoon who would dominate Italian politics for decades. Love him or hate him, he became the face of Italy's turbulent democracy in the modern age. The new century brought new challenges and new pride. In 2002, Italy joined the Eurozone, adopting the euro as its currency. In 2006, Italian fans celebrated as their national football team won the FIFA World Cup, their fourth triumph. The nation once divided by history was united, if only for a moment, by joy. But the global financial crisis of 2008 hit hard. Unemployment rose, debt climbed, and young Italians began leaving again to seek opportunity abroad, just as their ancestors had a century earlier. Still, Italy endured. Tourism, art, fashion, and food continued to draw the world in. Cities like Florence, Venice, and Rome became living museums, where every stone and street told a story of greatness. And then, in 2020, the world faced the COVID-19 pandemic. Italy was one of the first nations to be hit. Its streets fell silent again, but this time, not because of war. Yet even through grief and isolation, the world watched as Italians sang from their balconies, a song of courage, unity, and hope. That moment reminded everyone of what Italy truly was, not just a land, but a spirit that cannot be broken. Today, in 2025, Italy stands as one of the world's great democracies, proud, creative, and resilient. Its economy faces challenges, but its culture continues to inspire. From Michelangelo's art to Ferrari's speed, from Roman ruins to modern design, Italy still leads the world in beauty and imagination. More than 2,000 years after the first Romans built their empire, the Italian story continues, not as a tale of emperors and conquerors, but as a story of people who never gave up. This is Italy, eternal, passionate, and forever reborn.